Right everyone, it is Finn here and welcome to now I've been waiting to do this for a very long time, my World Cup Round 1 prediction video. Yes ladies and gentlemen, the World Cup 2022, it is finally here. I mean, it genuinely feels like Christmas. Well, maybe that's because the World Cup is kind of being played over Christmas time, but nevertheless, the World Cup 2022 is finally here, and as I said in today's video, we're going to be talking about the first round of the group stage for the Qatar World Cup. Of course, before we jump into my predictions, I want to hear from you guys in the comment section down below. Who are you supporting throughout this tournament? Once again, I'm from South Africa, so luckily, I guess I'm kind of a neutral throughout this competition. I can kind of choose who I want through various stages.
That's cheating.
And of course, as you guys can pick up, I've got a whole new setup. Of course, it is not done yet, so apologies if you guys, which I'm sure you can hear a lot of echoes throughout this video. My walls are somewhat naked at the moment, so I do apologize if it does echo. There is still a lot that will happen. Now, of course, believe it or not a lot of people are watching this video to hear about my life story. So, of course, without further ado, jumping into our first set of predictions for the Qatar World Cup, which, as I said, I can't believe we're already saying that. I am so excited. But we have Qatar versus Ecuador. Now, of course, as we know, Qatar being the home nation, there's always that little bit of extra motivation, that little bit of extra something about the home nation to do well at competitions like this. But whether they can take points from Ecuador is something I'm not convinced about. Looking at Ecuador during the World Cup qualifiers, they drew to both Brazil and Argentina, and while they were taking points from Neymar Jr and Lionel Messi, Qatar were losing 3-0 to the under-23 Croatian national team. Now yes, I'm sure this Qatari national team is full of some brilliant players who could achieve something versus a team like Ecuador. But from what I've seen so far, I don't think people should underestimate Ecuador, and I do think they could take it 1-0. Once again, I feel like Ecuador are one of those favorites to be underdogs in this competition, and real dark horses. I feel like they could surprise a lot of people, and you cannot sleep on a team like them. Now, talking about a team you cannot sleep on. Next up, we've got England versus Iran. Now, in terms of a team not to sleep on, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know whether I'm referring to England or Iran. As you know, England were absolutely woeful. I mean, it was pathetic what they did in the Nations League.
Absolute joke.
And versus a team like Iran, they might have to run for the hills, if that makes sense. Did that work as a joke?
No.
Because look at a team like Iran, during the World Cup qualifiers and looking at the Asian Cup, in terms of defensive abilities, they were super solid, and versus an England team that are struggling to score at the moment, they could really be able to capitalize. And on top of that, they've got one of the most underrated strikers in world football with Taremi. So looking at this Iranian national team, I wouldn't be surprised if they took points from England. But once again, looking at the talent in this England squad, it really is hard not to vote for them. And because of their success in recent major international tournaments, I'm still going to go for England, and I'm going to go with a 2-1 result. Once again, although I could definitely see Iran taking points here, as I said, I do think Southgate will take the points. Next up, we've got an absolutely gigantic game with Senegal versus Netherlands. Now, as we know, the Netherlands, I would argue, may be the best team in the Nations League so far this season. And looking at Senegal, the recent African Cup of Nations winners, this could be an incredibly close game. But before I jump into what my prediction for the game is, let me remind you guys that throughout the entirety of the World Cup, I'm going to be live streaming every single African game throughout the World Cup. So of course, if you do enjoy your African football and you want to join my live streams, do make sure to subscribe down below to catch those videos. Once again, it's going to be a fun time. We can just talk about African football or absolutely any topic. It doesn't even have to be football throughout those live streams. But of course, Senegal versus Netherlands will be one of them. Now looking at these two nations, as much as I want to give Senegal a chance on this, obviously as someone who lives in Africa, I always want a nation like Senegal to do well. But my one worry for them is the fact that Sadio Mane is out injured.
He's the best football player in the world.
And I don't want to admit this, but throughout the African Cup of Nations, they really relied on Sadio Mane. He is the reason why they ended up winning the competition. And of course, him being injured in a game like this versus one of the top nations in world football, I do think Netherlands will take this one, and I think they'll take it 2-0. Once again, this Senegal national team is absolutely packed with superstars, but they need to prove that they can stand on their own feet without Sadio Mane, otherwise they could get crushed here. Now, heading on from a gigantic game to another really interesting fixture, we've got USA versus Wales.
Woohoo! USA! USA!
Now, of course, I mean, you know it's a problem when the star of your national team is banned from playing another sport throughout the entirety of the World Cup.
At least give me an albatross or something.
Once again, look at this Wales national team. I think I'm quite happy that Gareth Bale managed to get them to the World Cup. I mean, let's be honest, he carried them to get to the World Cup. What's it? Their first World Cup in 64 years? That is insane to think about. Obviously, Wales versus USA, I feel like it could be an incredibly close game. And I'm going to put down our first draw of the predictions. I'm going to put down a 1-1 draw. Obviously, looking at this US national men's team, it's kind of hard to predict how well an American team will do. As we know, they mainly play against each other, so it's really hard to say how they'll do against European giants. As we know, Wales haven't been doing great in the Nations League, but in recent international tournaments, they've really proven their own. I do feel like it could be an incredibly close one. I do think USA have some top talent, but once again, I'm not too convinced about either, so they will share the points. Now, heading on to our next game, which definitely not sharing points here, as we have Argentina versus Saudi Arabia. Now, I don't know if you guys knew this, but I'm quite a fan of the Argentinian national team. And I mean, it's not just biased to say this, but Argentina should crush Saudi Arabia.
Ooh, you're hard, showing off.
Once again, nothing negative versus Saudi Arabia. Well, I mean, I can't say that after saying they're going to get crushed. But once again, no hard feelings versus Saudi Arabia. It's nothing personal. I do think that they've got a few decent footballers in their team. But versus one of the favorites to win the World Cup as a whole, it just has to be Argentina, and it has to be 4-1. As we know, this Argentinian national team, super strong over the last 18 months to 24 months. They've been one of the best international teams in world football. And versus the Saudi Arabia national team, once again, I almost feel sorry for them. But of course, moving on to our next game, who do we have next? We've got Denmark versus Tunisia. Once again, this Belgium national team, my head's all over the place all of a sudden. This Danish national team, as we know, over the last 18 months as well, kind of same period as Argentina, they've been a really solid team. One of the biggest dark horses in world football. As you know, now that Christian Eriksen is back to playing football, and especially for this international team, this Danish national team is definitely not a team to underestimate. Saying that, neither is Tunisia. I mean, obviously in the African Cup of Nations, they had a very poor start. But once their best players did come back from COVID and from injury, they were a real threat to deal with. And had they been fit from the beginning, they could have won the tournament as a whole. Obviously, on top of that, they did win the current cup. So this has potential to be a very close game. But look at Denmark in the Nations League getting 2 wins versus France. I do feel like Denmark will take this. Once again, it could be convincing, and I'm going to put forward a 2-0 win. As I said, nothing bad versus Tunisia. I want African nations to do well, but this Danish national team, it is just something else. Now, talking about something else, we've got a really interesting game next, as we have Mexico versus Poland. Now, as we know, Mexico, Ochoa has finally come out of his cave. Once again, he comes out every 4 years when the World Cup arrives. Maybe it's the same cave Mariah Carey lives in and comes out during Christmas. But as we know, this Mexican national team always has something to display, always has something to show. They always have that little bit of extra pride in them. But obviously a major loss for them is the fact that Corona and Jimenez up front are injured. And to be honest with you, with their 2 main star men up front injured, I don't know if they'll give them a chance versus a very fully fit Poland team. And I could see Poland winning this one. I'm just going to say 1-0 in the meantime, although it could be a much bigger win. As we know, this Poland national team been very underwhelming in recent international tournaments. But as we know, in terms of individuals, they are a star-struck team, and they could absolutely crush the Mexican national team.
Yeah, we in Bayern, we have Robert Lewandowski.
Now, heading into our next game, talking about crushing, we could see an embarrassing score here as we have France versus Australia. Now, unfortunately, when I say embarrassing, I don't necessarily mean in France's favour, as they've also been horrific in the recent Nations League. And on top of that, the World Cup curse still exists. So in terms of an embarrassing result, dare I say, for the team down under, they could take France down under. No! Obviously, looking at this Australian national team, they've got 1 or 2 decent players in their squad. But even in terms of what they have, and even in terms of the World Cup curse, to be honest with you, I can still see France winning this one. And I could see them winning it maybe even 3-0. I mean, we talk about the injuries in this French national team. Obviously, Christopher Nkunku has recently picked up an injury. It is heartbreaking to hear about. Considering Christopher Nkunku, you've got Paul Pogba and N'Golo Kante all in your midfield injured.
I don't feel so good.
It is a major loss. Obviously, Camavinga wanted to injure Nkunku to maybe secure his spot in the squad. But at the end of the day, this French national team has so much quality in it. And versus an Australian national team, they should still get the job done. Now, heading into our next game, once again, another African giant, as we have Morocco versus Croatia. Now, once again, look at this Moroccan national team. I've got no idea what to expect from them. They were arguably on the attacking front, the best team in the African Cup of Nations. It's just the fact that they got knocked out maybe earlier than expected. Obviously, look at this Croatian national team. They were brilliant in the recent Nations League. Once again, I keep on saying that about everyone, but it's my only frame of reference of international football over the last year. But looking at Croatian, I believe they topped a group that had Denmark, Denmark and France in it. Once again, you cannot underestimate this Croatian national team. Look at this Moroccan national team though. I don't think you can underestimate them either. I think with Hamdallah reintroduced to the squad, I think with CH back in the squad, things could get very, very ugly for any of these two teams. And for some reason, I just think Croatia will take it.
What is this? What is this?
Once again, I do want African nations to do well, but I think Croatia are one of the best teams in world football at the moment, and just not a lot of people recognize it. Now, heading into our next game, once again, another interesting fixture, as we have Germany versus Japan. Now, once again, I think Germany probably are the favourites. I am going to give them a 1-0 win. Obviously, they'll look to improve off of their previous World Cup performance. But looking at this German national team, my only worry for them is their striker position at the moment. Obviously, with Timo Werner out of the World Cup.
I play a lot of Fortnite.
They could really struggle there. I just think, though, that if they put Thomas Muller up front, they probably will be sorted. The man who's been 32 years old for the last 8 years. But as we know, this German national team, on their day, they are an absolute powerhouse in the world of football. And versus Japan, I feel like they could take it. Although Japan also with some of the stars on their squad, you can't underestimate them either. They made it to the final of the recent Current Cup.
I'm kind of a big deal.
They do have a very, very decent team that could take points from Germany, but I do think Germany will end up taking it. Now, heading into our next game, we've got Spain versus Costa Rica. Now, once again, looking at the Spanish national team, by far a better team than Costa Rica. But as we know, Costa Rica, once again, defensively with Keylor Navas, if he is fully fit from his back injury, once again, he could totally shut down Spain. But at the end of the day, I do think the Spanish national team is far stronger, and they should still be able to secure a win. I'm just going to put a 1-0 win. Once again, I've got no idea how to read Spain at the moment. They could be Spain, or they could be Spain without the S. We've got no way of judging yet, but they still have a better team, and they should beat Costa Rica. Now, jumping into our next game, we've got Belgium versus Canada. Once again, super interesting fixture. As you know, it's been a while since Canada's played in a World Cup, and looking at Belgium, we're kind of in that confusing phase of, are they in their golden generation? Are they leaving their golden generation? Have they totally passed it? Once again, it's 2022 and Belgium doesn't know what to identify as.
Let me talk!
Obviously, looking at this Belgium national team, even though they are leaving a golden generation, I still feel like they've got a really good squad at the moment, and I feel like it will be a 2-1 win. We've got Switzerland versus Cameroon. Now, dare I say it, this might be the first chance so far this World Cup that an African nation might be able to pick up a win. Look, I'm sure they'll be able to get many throughout the group stage tournament, but obviously look at Switzerland. They have not been in good form at all in the Nations League. Looking at Cameroon, once again, I'm a tiny bit worried. In recent games, they've lost to teams like Uzbekistan, which could be illegal for Cameroon to do, but they still have a very decent team, although it came third place in the African Cup of Nations. I would say it was one of the best overall performers at that tournament, and just got unlucky and knocked out relatively early. I do think this Cameroon national team has a lot to show for it. They've got some star talent in their team, and I think they are going to be able to get a result versus Switzerland. I mean, you just look at a striker like Choupo-Moting up front, he's been absolutely lethal. You've got Mbeumo for Brentford, he's been lethal. You've got Andre Onana. You've got so many brilliant players in this squad. It could go absolutely either way, but I do back Cameroon to take it all. Now, heading into one of our last games, we've got Uruguay versus South Korea. Now, we've got 3 games left to talk about. Let me remind you guys that if you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe, as the goal is 10,000 subscribers before the end of the World Cup. But heading into Uruguay versus South Korea, once again, it is not a worry in my head whatsoever that Uruguay should win this one. I mean, they've got some of the best players in world football in every single position, from Valverde to Nunes, Suarez, Cavani, Arojo. This is an absolutely stacked team, and versus a South Korea team that, I mean, they're just struggling at the moment. I mean, they might not even have Heung-min Son for their first game, although he probably will be back in this game.
I'm Batman.
Once again, at the end of the day, although South Korea rightfully deserve their spot at the World Cup, they do have a decent squad. I just view Uruguay as a far better team, and although maybe they haven't gotten some results that they've needed to over the last year in some games, I do think that they should still take it. Now, heading into our next game, we've got Portugal versus Ghana. Now, of course, the Black Stars of Ghana, once again, totally reinventing themselves over the last year, bringing in some top talented players. But my one worry, my one concern for the Black Stars of Ghana is the fact that their 2 main goalkeepers are out of the World Cup. Both of them are injured, not selected for the World Cup. and versus, let's be honest, Cristiano Ronaldo, Bernardo Silva, Bruno Fernandes, so many top talented attackers, I feel like Ghana might end up struggling here. Obviously, I really do like this Black Stars of Ghana team. I feel like they have a lot of potential to them. But without their two main goalkeepers, I feel like it could be a real worry for them. And I do think Portugal could take this one 2-0. Although, if Ghana did manage to get a draw here, I wouldn't be that surprised. Obviously, we saw Portugal drop weird points in the qualifiers for the competition. But once again, I do feel like at this moment in time, they are the better team and they should take it. But ladies and gentlemen, that takes us to our final game of World Cup Round 1. Once again, some fantastic games to look out for. But looking at it, it is Brazil versus Serbia. Brazil, arguably maybe the best nation in world football at the moment, versus one of the biggest dark horses. Obviously, if Serbia are able to get a point versus Brazil, it is a huge, huge one for them. I do feel, though, that this Brazilian national team does have enough to beat Serbia, and I feel like it will be 3-1. Once again, Serbia, we know the talent that they've had, we know the results that they can get, but versus Brazil, who, as I said, arguably the best team in world football at the moment, I just don't see it happening. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for my World Cup Round 1 prediction video. Once again, so many exciting games to look out for. The World Cup is finally here. Once again, as football fans, it's just an exciting time to be alive. I hope that you guys did enjoy the video. As I said, subscribe if you're not subscribed. If we could reach 10k subs before the end of the year, it would be pretty cool. Of course, do like the video down below. If you did, well, obviously like the video. But until next time, this has been Finn, FYNN. Don't forget your predictions down below. Bye bye.